You check the time 46 times a day. That's not an exaggeration. That's an average, measured across smartphone users. And most of those checks happen without you even deciding to do it. Your thumb just moves, your eyes just flick down. For your ancestors, there was no screen to check, no numbers glowing in the dark, no little hands sweeping around a circle, and yet they were never lost in time. They knew exactly when to plant, when to hunt, when to gather, when to sleep. How? For most of human history, time wasn't something you looked at, it was something you felt. Start with your own body. Right now, inside you, there's a cluster of about 20,000 neurons sitting just above where your optic nerves cross, called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Don't worry about the name. Just think of it as your internal clock, a tiny biological pacemaker that runs on roughly a 24-hour cycle, even without any outside cues at all. In the 1960s, a German researcher named Jürgen Aschoff proved this by putting volunteers in an underground bunker with no windows, no clocks, and no way to know if it was day or night. What happened? Their bodies kept time anyway. Sleep, hunger, body temperature, all of it drifted into a rhythm close to 24 hours, generated entirely from the inside. You don't need a clock to know time. You are one, but your ancestors didn't just rely on their bodies. They read the sky like a language. Picture a hunter-gatherer camp at dusk. The sun is dropping behind a ridge, and nobody needs to announce that dinner is coming or that it's almost time to gather the children in. The color of the light does that job. A low golden angle means one thing. A high white sun means another. Richard Lee, an anthropologist who spent years living among the Juhansi San of the Kalahari in the 1960s, documented how precisely people coordinated group activities using nothing but the sun's position and the length of shadows falling across the sand. No one owned a watch. No one needed one. The whole camp ran on shared, visible, unspoken agreement with the sky. At night, the sky kept talking. Different stars rise and set with the seasons, appearing at different points on the horizon depending on the time of year. Long before anyone wrote anything down, people were tracking this. In 1972, near a rock shelter in France called Abri Blanchard, archaeologists found a small piece of eagle bone, about 20,000 years old, covered in a sequence of curved and pitted marks. A researcher named Alexander Marshak argued these weren't decoration. He proposed they were a running tally of the phases of the moon, scratched in over roughly 2 months, night by night, as someone watched the sky and kept count. If he's right, this is one of the oldest surviving records of a human being deliberately timing something. Now here's the part that should stop you for a second. That bone wasn't a calendar hanging on a wall. It was carried. It went where the person went. Time for your ancestors wasn't fixed to a location. It moved with you. The moon did most of the heavy lifting when it came to longer stretches of time. It has an obvious, undeniable shape that changes every single night in a pattern anyone can learn to predict. 29.5 days, full circle, repeat. Long before agriculture, this was likely one of the very first units of time larger than a single day that humans could reliably count. Even the word month comes from moon. That's not a coincidence. That's a fossil, hiding in your own language, of how people once organized their lives. Then there's the sun's yearly path, which is slower and harder to see, but far more consequential once you're farming instead of foraging. Suddenly it matters enormously when the frost ends and when it begins again. And this is where things get physically massive. At Stonehenge, in what is now southern England, the main axis of the monument aligns with the sunrise on the summer solstice and the sunset on the winter solstice, the two extreme points the sun reaches in its yearly swing. Whoever built it, starting around 3000 BCE, moved stones weighing many tons to lock a moment in the sky into permanent stone. Not to look pretty, to know when. Let's reconstruct a single day using nothing you have ever owned. You wake with the first gray light, not because anything told you to, but because your body already knows dawn is close. The position of the sun tells you how much of the morning is left for the difficult work, before the heat makes it unbearable. Around midday, your shadow shrinks to almost nothing beneath you, a signal so universal that cultures with no contact with each other independently built devices to track exactly that shrinking and lengthening shadow, what we now call sundials, some of the earliest known examples appearing in ancient Egypt more than 3,000 years ago. As the sun drops and your shadow stretches long again, you know the working day is closing. And that night, if the moon is full and bright, that's often when longer journeys, negotiations, or gatherings would happen, because moonlight was the only free light source anyone had. This is where the counterintuitive twist comes in, and it's a big one. Your ancestors likely experienced time as more accurate, not less, than most people do today. That sounds backwards, but think about what a clock actually does. It gives you one single abstract number that is the same whether you're exhausted, freezing, exhilarated, or half asleep. It flattens time into something identical every day. Ancestral timekeeping did the opposite. It was directly tied to the actual state of the world around you and to the actual state of your own body. Sleep researcher Till Roenberg has spent decades studying what he calls social jet lag, the gap between the time your body actually wants to function on and the rigid clock time your job or school forces on you. His research suggests a huge percentage of people in industrialized societies are chronically living out of sync with their own internal clock, a mismatch that simply could not exist for someone whose entire schedule was dictated by the sun's actual position and their body's actual signals. In a strange way, the clock made time more precise and human beings less in tune with it. There's also something your ancestors had that almost nobody experiences anymore. Total darkness, followed by real light. No streetlights, no screens an inch from the face at midnight. Just the sun going down, and later, the sun coming back up. That kind of unbroken contrast is exactly what keeps a biological clock strongly anchored to the real day-night cycle. Modern sleep researchers now recommend getting outside in the first hour after waking, specifically to recreate this ancient anchor, because artificial light has quietly weakened it in almost everyone alive today. So here's the mirror, the part that lands closest to home. You still have that same 20,000 neuron master clock in your brain. It still runs whether you look at a screen or not. When you feel that dip in energy in the mid-afternoon, that's not weakness. That's the same rhythm your ancestors felt. As the sun crossed toward its lower afternoon angle, a signal built into you across hundreds of thousands of years, still firing today, just with nobody around to explain what it means anymore. You check the time 46 times a day, but somewhere underneath every one of those checks, your body is still keeping the oldest clock there is, the one your ancestors never had to look at, because they were never anything other than perfectly on time.